companies. But cool, without further ado, I'll set up. There's a formula for this that you might recognise. Anne, we'd love you to set the scene of flag guidance and what that means to you and organisations at the moment.
We'll pass. Do we need one? Or, yeah? I don't know. Allez. So brace yourself for a bit of French accent in the microphone, please. What does it mean? No, and actually no. Just brace yourself for it's French accent without microphone. Okay, right. I'll put this here. Hello. Right. What does it mean? It means it's a guidance. So it seems obvious to say go and read the guidance, but I know within even my peers, it's quite a hefty document and it's quite easy to skim through it. But it is good. It is a review for us of our targets. So flag, very heavy. Again, Compass, for the one who might not know, is a food group, food company. Dare I say, the biggest in the UK and Ireland. So yes, flag is very big. We don't only do flag as in, we also do those we have a target of 72% of reduction, but non-flag is also quite important in our space. We have contract with the NHS, for example, where that cleaning side and services is quite big too. It is challenging. Compass, UK and Ireland made a commitment to be net zero by 2030. So flag is what does it mean to us? It means it's a big challenge, basically. I mean, I don't know how to put it. It is a challenge for everybody in the food industry. But 2030, we've got realistically about 6 years remaining, really, to achieve that target. So the advantage of flag is to really hope that the whole value chain, the people, all the actors in the industry will be sticking to that guideline and that will be supporting our own ambition. However, there is disparity, and it's something we touch on other conversation, disparity in timelines across different actors.
Thanks. It's not working. Go. Rachel, from a government's perspective, what are some of the big opportunities for organisations and companies in this space?
Yeah, so just to, I guess, step back a bit and give a bit of a wider context to the International Forest Unit and I guess the international landscape which SBTI flag has now come about. We know that almost a quarter of global emissions come from this sector, and we know largely when it comes to the supply chain, they largely sit in the Scope 3 category for food and drink businesses, for retail, hospitality, apparel, and personal care as well. And the space that the International Forest Unit is looking at in particular is globally traded commodities, so soy, palm oil, beef, and cocoa, which are not only common sources of Scope 3 emissions, but also leading drivers of deforestation and land conversion. So from the government's perspective, we see the flag guidance, particularly its inclusion of a zero deforestation target by 2025 as a really critical and positive step forward to not only tackling Scope 3 emissions and aligning with the 1.5 degree pathway and the goals of the Paris Agreement, but also meeting the goals of the Glasgow Leaders Declaration on Forests and Land Use, which was launched at COP26, which was signed by over 140 countries to halt and reverse forest loss and land degradation by the end of the decade, and also meet a host of other nature-positive commitments that we are now agreed to. So there are lots of different opportunities for the UK to continue leading on that effort and delivering on those commitments, but we also see the flag guidance as a real opportunity to scale up nature-based solutions in companies' own supply chains. We know that many businesses in the room and in this sector in general are already investing in projects that build capacity within suppliers and producers around regenerative agriculture, agroforestry, and land restoration, which not only tackle Scope 3 emissions, but build that supply chain resilience, foster that collaboration across different supply chain actors, and address those landscapes as well where companies have a vested interest in long-term productivity. And I know you've touched on this, and the flag guidance has a lot more focus on granular data input, which we've already heard a lot from businesses about the challenges in meeting that which I'm sure Anne can speak a lot more to, and I want to hear from a lot more of you as well on those challenges and how government and other organisations as well can support with filling those gaps. But it also presents an opportunity for companies, particularly those further downstream, I think, in the supply chain, to engage with suppliers and producers and grow that collaboration as well. So there are lots of different opportunities, I think, that FLAG presents. I also probably I should definitely add that the time in which it's emerged is also an opportunity for companies to prepare for shifts in the domestic regulatory landscape too, that stem from international commitments like the Glasgow Leaders Declaration. But a notable one that you'll all be aware of is the due diligence regulations that the government is committed to implementing through the Environment Act as part of a wider package of measures to increase the sustainability of the UK's supply chains and tackle illegal deforestation in supply chains too. The ISSB have also included Scope 3 now in their new set of standards, which the government will be reviewing and considering as part of its assessment of its own reporting requirements in the UK. And I think a lot of you are engaged with the Independent Transition Plan Task Force. They are due to publish their disclosure framework, I think, next month, and the government will also be consulting on that framework as part of a wider consultation on climate transition plans over this winter. So there's lots of different moving things happening in this space that the FLAG guidance definitely aligns to, domestically and internationally. So we definitely see a lot of opportunity, but we also acknowledge that there are many challenges, particularly around the data requirements, that we're very keen to understand further and support, particularly in bringing the right actors into the room to have those conversations.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. And actually, one of the conversations that we were all having with Joe was around data availability, and that we're using industry averages and actually not able to get the granularity we need. And what are some of the constructive approaches that you've taken when it comes to applying the FLAG guidance across Compass?
The constructive one is despite the quality of the data, you just have to progress. Again, that it's 2030, it's 35, 40, regardless. So we've made, again, a clear plan, clearer enough at the time, of a roadmap on how we were going to achieve this without really having any data. We just knew certain things needed to be done. We just knew we needed to look at the red meat, at the dairy. Again, we're a food industry. And then, of course, you can fine-tune it, and the more you know, the more you can target, the more you can divide and conquer within your own organization. But I can't remember exactly what's the saying in English, but you should not let perfection be in the path of progress, right? And that's exactly what it is, because otherwise we're still going to be stuck in 20 years. So, yeah, that's the constructive approach, really.
Yeah. One of the other things when we were speaking about approaches was collaboration and partnerships. So I know you, Rachel, you've been involved in some big partnerships and collaborations over the past few months and the past year. Would be really good to hear from you around that, and then also from Compass Group perspective, when it comes to pre-competitive collaboration. We're going to have a whole session on collaboration later. It's the fluffiest word used, I feel, at the moment, but clear, concise examples if you've got them.
Yeah, so the UK is involved in and supports a range, which I won't go into all of them, but in relation to the FLAG guidance, I think, firstly, the International Forest Unit, for background, was set up following the launch of the Glasgow Leaders Declaration, and it oversees the UK's international forest policies and ambitions across the international landscape, but it also oversees the delivery of the UK's pledge of £1.5 billion to forest protection, restoration, and increasing sustainable land use and agricultural practices in producer or forested countries. So there are a suite of programs that the International Forest Unit oversees that directs increased finance flows to different countries for this purpose. But beyond programs, we also support and convene a number of dialogues, government to government and industry dialogues as well. Since COP26, we, alongside Indonesia, have been hosting co-chairing the Forest, Agriculture and Commodity Trade Dialogue, or the FACT Dialogue, which some of you may have heard of. It brings together 28 importing and exporting countries to share best practice and have conversations about how to deepen partnerships and co-create solutions that have mutual benefits for each country around promoting sustainable trade whilst protecting forests and critical ecosystems and sustaining livelihoods as well. And we've seen these partnerships deepen over the past 2 years since it's been launched. One of the areas that it focuses in on particular is transparency and traceability. So a subset of countries in that dialogue are looking to drive action that increases that traceability of forest risk commodities along their supply chains and zoning in on national frameworks that can be strengthened, enforced in a better way, technologies and tools that also can be scaled up to make this easier, particularly with the due diligence regulations from the EU, the UK and the US coming about quite soon. So that's one of the collaborations and partnerships that we are involved in. Another is we support the Tropical Forest Alliance with convening 14 of the largest agricultural commodity trading companies that launched a sector-specific roadmap last year at COP27. We, alongside the US, Norway, and Germany, engage with these companies to make sure that we are tracking progress on how these actions are being implemented, but also how, from some sectors, further ambition is being pursued as well, particularly as we get closer to COP28. Speaking of collaboration, I guess, and supply chain collaboration, we are supporting the TFA with trying to bring these trading companies closer together with the Consumer Goods Forum's Forest Positive Coalition, who are already doing a range of work on initiatives to invest at farm level in Brazil, in Southeast Asia, and in Africa as well, to try and bring these traders and consumer goods forums, coalitions together and strengthen that joint action, I think, and increase transparency too in the flow of information between different supply chain actors, where I think that should hopefully help with applying the flag guidance. At domestic level, in relation to the data challenge, and I know Helen is also here today from DEFRA, who can speak more to some of this work as well. The government is supporting the Hestia open source online platform, which is aiming to increase the amount of available data on the environmental impact of different critical food commodity groups, and try and help fill some of those gaps around company and product level data that the flag guidance calls for. Government is also trying to develop a more streamlined approach to Scope 3 reporting for the food and drink sector, which should also hopefully help plug some of those gaps and eliminate some of the fragmentation, I think, in the tools and methodologies that are out there at the moment that are applied to reporting on emissions, and particularly Scope 3 emissions, which are already challenging as it is. And I was speaking to someone in the room about this earlier as well, but another key collaboration and partnership that we support is in the UK is the Sustainable Commodities Initiative and the UK Soy Manifesto, which Africa facilitate and oversee. It involves the sharing of really valuable advice and technical support for companies in this sector around sourcing responsibly sourcing forest risk commodities and sharing best practice and learnings. We use this as a really important way of hearing from industry and also understanding how we can support with unblocking some of the barriers to applying not only the flag guidance, but meeting other policies and standards in this space too.
Cool, thanks, Rach.
Well, I think Rachel named them all, so thank you very much. Just jumping quickly on the procurement side and collaboration, of course, with suppliers, which is a no-brainer, and I'm sure most of you are already doing it. But one of the tools we use in Compass, and I would recommend doing it if you haven't already, is really have that sustainability team sitting with the procurement team. That really we can see the progress we can have from that. So we created a supplier hub where we can communicate, exchange, educate. Not all of our suppliers have a sustainability team themselves. And just really when we go to tender, when we go to bidding, we have straight away that sustainability lens at the time of the tender to then we were talking about data, that it's either LCAs when they're available, but any form of data, and really have that scrutiny before we sign a contract. I find it's very, very helpful. Other groups, so yes, Effica, absolutely. I mean, it's a good example to get a bit of a state of the value chain, really, in some quite hotspot product as well. So, but touching on one that I find very interesting, and some in the rooms are participating into it, and there is other similar groups, but we were talking about dairy, we were talking about beef being one of those categories we need to reduce. The intention is still to have cows. We believe it's important for biodiversity, but whatever will be left needs to come from a more sustainable farming practice. So we're part of the Soil Association Exchange program, which we find very, very helpful. It's different phases, of course, different actors, again, manufacturers, beef producers, catering company, but to really together sort of try to define what is that regenerative agriculture everybody's talking about, what are really those criteria that we want to achieve, because we're talking collaboration with suppliers. We really need to be speaking the same language as well. We are sharing ultimately a lot of our suppliers with Sainsbury's, with M&S and so on, when they're not sometimes some of our partners. So just very, very key. I think this is the value of those partnerships is to have, of course, corporation almost leading the way in terms of defining and KPIs and sort of moving the dial a little bit.
What do you find the differences between, you talk about collaboration across the food value chain, but then cross-industry, like cross-company collaboration as well? Have you got any examples of where Compass have been involved in those, whether it be with Sainsbury's?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Sainsbury's are part of this program. Sodexo, we're part of GECO together, so the welfare, global welfare, animal welfare group. Again, it is pre-commercial. It is in our own interest ultimately to move the dial in the same directions, moving, and I say that with a lot of humility. Compass is big, but we're not a retailer either. We're actually grateful to be able to be part of those groups. But together to be able to move the dial and hopefully get that economy of scale that we need in those practices. If we get a supply chain that is too fragmented with different practices, then nobody benefits from that. So I think it's very much the intention to really uniformize, if that's an English word. It works in French, I'm not sure in English, but you get the gist of it. To ultimately get that economy of scale. We know sustainability comes at a cost. Not always. We have great example of being sustainable, of course, saves you money more and more. I think inflation has been ultimately one of the way to prove this, but it is great to be able to get that industry moving at the same pace. Definitely.
Yeah. Thank you so much. The time. We want to go to Q&A, open it up to the floor. Any questions for Rachel, Anne, from the floor? Don't be shy. Thanks, Alice.
Question for Anne.
I'll pass this, actually.
Okay. You say that you work with procurement very closely, and you said that sustainability is part of the onboarding process for suppliers. Does it have the same weight as cost? Is it equal precedence, just out of interest?
It's a very good question. It will depend on categories. So we have our hotspots, like I'm sure everybody is starting identifying them. And they are, again, the meat, they are the dairy, but there also are the cold beverages and so on. So depending on really what is the carbon impact on certain category, then yes, we absolutely sometimes equal cost. I come from procurement. I now move to operation, and I've got to work when we receive bids from clients, and I can see that happening as well from our clients. So the demand where nobody really cared so much about me a few years ago, I seem to be high in demand to help filling up those bids, and I'm sure most of you around the room will start feeling that pressure because the waiting is actually quite important. Okay. We go to we are now in a few bids where it's about 30% is on cost. Now you do what you want with the scoring at the end. We know that it can always be readjusted, but yeah, very, very important. Absolutely, yeah. And for Compass, the way we will select suppliers, absolutely, and then integrate it into contract. Really putting sustainability. It's one thing to choose at the time of an RFA. but then to really put it in the contract as part of the SLAs and part of the joint business reviews. Absolutely, absolutely.
Great. Something to strive for.
Any others in the room? Flags cause silence. Cool. Well, more time to talk on tables. Thank you so much, Anne, Rachel.